So, as we transition back to the UK for another winter, as we transition back into our winter schedule, which means having a bit more time to get some work done, and hopefully then back into a regular podcast calendar, I thought it was long overdue to provide an update, hey Blue, on our own projects, as we used to do fairly regularly on a monthly basis, but we haven't done for a little while. Now, there are a few specific aspects of some of our projects that I want to call out in a bit more detail. So, things like how we saved £40,000 in potential costs on one of our projects with our approach to planning. The way that we approached planning saved us £40,000 on that project. And how on another project we have had to pivot from plan A to plan B to plan C. I'll go into those in more detail in separate short episodes. So I'll do that fairly soon. But for today, I just want to bring you up to speed on where each of our current 4 projects are right now. How we see these projects progressing over the coming months to get them, some of them complete in the next couple of months, and some of them certainly a lot closer to being complete. And hopefully, as always, there will be at least a couple of insights that are relevant to what you're working on right now, even if the projects aren't necessarily the same. There are always lessons to learn from what other people are doing, and hopefully you'll get something of value from this today. So with that in mind, let's get started. So we've got 4 projects in progress at the moment. We've got IPI Washway, which is a conversion of an office building in Trafford, which is kind of West Manchester, into 3 apartments. We have got IPI Carwood. That's our biggest project to date, both in terms of volume and cost and everything. That's the conversion of the 1970s ugly L-shaped flat roof building into 9 apartments. We've got IPI Florist, which is the conversion of an office into 2 houses, and then the new build construction of 2 additional houses on the land next door to it, so to create a terrace of 4 houses. And then we've got IPI Car Park, of course. It's a new build with 5 apartments and then ground floor office space. So in total then we've got 3 commercial conversions, one of which includes a new build element, and we've got 1 full new build. 22 units in total across those 4 sites. And the plan is to have a full clear out of those 4 projects in 2023, ready for some new deals. Some of them will be finished towards the start of the year, others will be finished towards the end of the year, but touch wood, this time next year, all 4 of those projects will be done and dusted and fully tenanted. So where are each of them up to at the moment? Well, IPI Washway is a good place to start because it is the furthest advanced. Planning progress on that, first of all, let's start there because we've had a couple of good results on that recently. And this is one of the issues that I will go into in more detail, how we have ended up moving away from our initial plan on this project, plan A, through to plan B, which we thought was a no-brainer, and now ultimately onto plan C. It's always good to have backup plans on your projects because things don't always go to plan. Certainly with COVID and wars and all that stuff going on, we need to be able to pivot and remain agile with our projects so that we don't catch a cold, as I'm suffering from today. If you can hear, I'm a little bit nasally, so apologies for that. Planning on this progressed less smoothly than anticipated. We have now had 2 planning applications rejected by Trafford Council. The first was for conversion into an HMO, and the second was a permitted development application for 3 apartments, basement, ground, and first floor. The HMO fine, we pivoted after that was rejected, and we thought the apartments were a no-brainer. The PD for the apartments was then refused based on the amount of natural light entering the basement floor. So there's a sort of minimum daylight light requirement for residential dwellings. Makes sense. People need daylight. And we had met all standards that we could find, but Trafford rejected that application. So despite us providing all of the professional reports showing the natural light and all that fun stuff, they effectively said, no, we don't like that. We don't like these sort of nationally adopted standards, so we're just going to refuse it. We're now dealing with this issue, rejected planning, in 3 separate ways, or with 3 additional applications. So first of all, we've appealed the decision on our permitted development application. We feel like the application should have been approved, and we're pretty confident that on appeal it will be approved. But it's a fallback plan, it's a backup. Appeals are never quick, they're never guaranteed. So because it's going to take time, we are progressing with it as our fallback plan. But we're confident that we would get there. It could take 6 to 12 months, so that's obviously not ideal. In addition to that, we have submitted a new permitted development application for the conversion of the ground and the first floors to residential apartments. So the bit that was non-contentious in the initial application that was rejected, the ground floor they were fine with, the first floor they were fine with. So we resubmitted a PD application for those 2 apartments, which has since been approved. So we've got 2 out of the 3 approved now, which is great. And we then submitted a further planning application to increase the size of the light wells in the basement to allow more natural light to enter the building. And thankfully, that was also approved last week. So 2 out of our 3 have now been approved of our Plan C, if you like. So now what we need to do, now that the top 2 floors have been approved and the increase in the size of the light wells has been approved, we need to go back with another permitted development application for the basement with the further increased amount of light getting in there, over and above what was already in excess of the sort of recommended minimum average daylight values, or however it is they use to track it. So lots of planning applications going on. The first 2 rejected, the second 2 approved, so hopefully we've turned a corner there now, and we need to get 1 of 2 approved now. So we've got a 50-50 chance, so either a permitted development for the ground floor and then the appeal sort of falls away because it becomes redundant, or if they still object to that basement apartment, then the appeal will get us there at some point in future. So not the best start from a planning point of view, but we have got, planning is important to understand. We've always got a fairly detailed planning strategy to get us the results that we're hoping for, and although our initial plan didn't go to plan, our backup plan appears to be working. So watch this space. 1 of 2 we need to get approved now, so we're staying hopeful for that. And then in terms of on-site progress, we did some work whilst planning was progressing because the building needed some work done to it anyway, whether it was staying as an office or converted into a house or apartments, whatever. There was some structural work that needed doing. We were going to reconfigure the space and renovate it anyway, so we didn't need to wait for planning to be approved to make a start on that. So things are progressing pretty well, and particularly since those other 2 applications have now been approved, we've really been able to hit it pretty hard. So the ground and the first floor, including actually the second or the loft floor for an additional bedroom, are all moving forwards at pace. So we've got a builder on site who is appointed up to and including first fix joinery, who's making good progress, and then after that builder has finished that package of works, we'll then move subcontractors in to do our first fix M&E, so all of our electric and plumbing and heating work. And then we'll manage subcontractors through to the end of the project. But we've got a single builder that's done all of the structural work and everything up to first fix joinery. We've got our first fix M&E booked in to follow straight after that builder being finished. And then things like the windows are on order for installation middle to end of this month, so that will make a big difference. So November 2022, the windows will be in. New utility connections are in progress. Obviously, it was a single unit with 1 electricity supply, 1 water supply, and whilst we will retain the building and all of the units within it, it still makes sense for us to split the utilities. So if at any point we wanted to refinance them individually or sell them individually in future, they can be self-contained units. So all of those utility connections take time, and the applications for them have been submitted, and we've got the dates booked in for all of that. And then we've got the plastering lined up for December. So once our first fix is done, plasterers will come in, they'll insulate, board, skim everywhere, ready for all of the second fix stuff, decoration, flooring, and all the stuff that makes it look nice and pretty. So our best case program on this project shows us being finished just in time for Christmas, but I think that's a little bit ambitious. We've still got this final planning application to deal with. Obviously, as we get towards Christmas, there will be delays because of weather and all the usual stuff. Plus, we've also got supply chain issues and all that fun stuff that is still hanging on, giving us issues. So technically, on paper, it could be finished by Christmas. Realistically, I think we're aiming to have snagging complete and have it on the market in January. So giving ourselves a bit of breathing space there. So we've got 2 months to make a lot of progress this side of the year, and then obviously another month into the new year to get things wrapped up, done and dusted, looking all pretty and on the market, and 3 new homes hopefully for 3 great tenants. So next steps, we're still fighting the good fight with those planning applications. So we've got that PD application for the basement, 8-week determination on that permitted development. So we should know back on that before Christmas, and the appeal would be into the new year if that PD application was refused. So we're not hoping for that outcome. Full steam ahead with the renovations, and then obviously just into the next quarter 1 of 2023, it will be finished and tenanted, which is great news. It's a nice project. It's our smallest, simplest that we've got in the books just now, and it's nice to see us making some solid progress on that. Second project I want to talk about today is IPI Carwood. So Carwood, like I mentioned, is the big 1970s concrete frame office building that we are converting into 9 apartments. So first of all, let's start with the planning progress on that again. Multiple applications here as well. The first planning application was for the change of use under permitted development. So that was approved months ago to convert the office as it was. So no external changes, no sort of external visual changes, keeping the window positions and the door positions because that's all you can do under permitted development. To convert the existing building from office space into residential. That was approved a while back. From there, we then submitted a second application for the external changes that we wanted to make to the building. So the change of use was approved. Now we wanted to go back and say, okay, well, let's make the building a little bit prettier. Let's change the dimensions of some of the windows to make them look more residential. Let's change the door positions because we've gone from having 1 main door to having 9 doors. We've actually all got external doors on this block, so rather than having a door into a lobby and then the apartment doors internally, all 9 doors are going to be on the external of the building with an external staircase and walkways and all that sort of stuff. So there was a bit of work there needed for the exterior. That was approved 2 weeks ago. So again, good progress on planning. Stockport Council actually turned that one around pretty quickly, which was good. The reason we did this was to avoid Section 106 contributions. This is another one of the things that I'm going to go into in a little bit more detail in a shorter follow-up episode, but this is what saved us about £40,000. So it was a bit of a delay with 2 applications versus 1 to split it with the change of use and then go for the external, but that saved us £40,000, so well worth the delay of those couple of months. So now planning is fully approved. It is time to crack on with this project and actually get it built out. So next steps for us on this one. Well, first of all, we've got the next stage of the design work to worry about. So just very high level, there are multiple different stages of design on a project. When you're first appraising a deal, you might do some high level feasibility or concept design. And then as you progress through it, if it needs planning, you would maybe get some planning drawings done, which are going to be more detailed than feasibility, but probably not detailed enough to actually hand to your builder and say, go and build this, but good for planning applications. And then once your planning is approved, you typically go for construction or technical design. So you can, if you're an architect or you've got any experience with architecture, you'll probably refer to this in the different REBA stages 1 to 5. Depending on the size of the project, we don't necessarily follow that line by line. So smaller projects, we will often work off planning drawings. If planning is not needed, we might not even have planning drawings. We might just do some sketches and say to the builder on site, hey, we need you to move this wall 2 meters that way. Smaller projects, that's fine. It can get confusing on bigger projects though if you don't have, hitting the microphone. If you don't have bigger, more detailed drawings for builders to work off, and that can lead to confusion and disputes and all that sort of stuff. So larger projects, including this one, we need to wait for technical design now that planning has been approved. In this case, that's going to take us about a month from where we are. So hopefully end of November, early December, we will have the technical design complete on this project. And then once that technical design is finalized, we can then go out to tender. So the tender process for this will be breaking it down into packages, probably looking in this case at the shell and core as a package, which will possibly include the demolition as well. So get rid of all the stuff that we don't need anymore, stabilize the building, and then bring it back into a watertight building with the correct like external materials and staircases and all that sort of stuff. So again, we can then bring in our subcontractors to do our M&E and our insulation and our plastering. That's how we like to do it typically, but there's lots of different ways. You could get a main contractor in to do everything. You could subcontract every single package, but we like to have that sort of shell and core as a big package that one person is responsible for, and then we pick it up from sort of four walls and a roof in watertight, and we'll take it from there. So we'll probably have a couple of different tenders for those different packages of work, starting with the one that's going to start first, which will be the demolition, and then the shell and core, potentially combined if they're going to be run together by the same contractor. But realistically then, we're looking into the early part of 2023 to have that main contractor appointed and ready to start, because tender processes can take a long time. So planning can take a long time. Tenders can take a long time. Bigger projects can take a long time, and it's a consideration you need to think about as you scale up to larger projects. Would you rather do one larger project that maybe gets you more units in a single crack of the whip but takes you twice as long to get there, or smaller deals faster, not worry about planning applications, just appoint your usual builder who you know's prices are good enough, or at least go for like more of an informal tender that doesn't require detailed QS input and all that sort of stuff? There are pros and cons to both. And we're probably at the stage where this size of project is about as big as we want to get for now, just because we see how long these things can take. And it's probably going to be a bit of a balance of bringing in a few smaller projects like Washway again to keep things ticking over and to keep adding to the portfolio whilst we wait for these larger projects to come to life. Anyway, that's an aside. So yeah, tender is the next step on this. And then come Jan-Feb 2023, we should really be able to move forwards with this at pace. And don't know exactly how long that program is going to take yet until we've had that design finalized, until we've had a QS come in and give us a proposed program, and then go out to tender and see if contractors can actually meet that program. But realistically, 6 months maybe. So middle of next year, we should be done and dusted with this one. That would be nice if everything goes to plan from here on out. Third project I'm going to talk through quickly, IPI Florist. So this is our part commercial conversion, part new build. Love this project, really excited about it. It's going to be a nice addition to the portfolio because they're going to be houses rather than apartments, which I think is important to try and create a mix of, a mix within your portfolio to diversify and spread your risk a little bit. But also, I think the UK requires more, not just housing, but houses. So for us to be able to add 4 houses into the Stockport housing stock, it's important to me. So, exciting project, less exciting progress on this one, but we've still had some progress nonetheless. We have been working through a couple of conditions on the approved planning application. So, hey, you've had planning approved, woo, congratulations. Doesn't necessarily mean your dealings with the local authority are done. If there are any conditions associated with that planning application, some of them may need to be dealt with before you can actually start on site. So in this case, we have got a Section 106 agreement to negotiate with the local authority, and that's taking some time. We're getting close to that being ready, but it took us a while to get anyone at the council who was even interested in speaking to us about it. So that was a bit frustrating, but making progress on that now. Section 106 is effectively a contribution that you make for amenities and facilities in the local area. So if you're creating new housing, the local authority will have a Section 106 contribution requirement per additional occupant that you're creating housing for things like infrastructure, playgrounds, and parks, and all that fun stuff. So that Section 106 contribution goes towards good stuff in the local community. But it seems, certainly in the case of this local authority, they're actually not that forthcoming in wanting to agree those contributions and get that legal stuff dealt with. Frustrating, making progress, should be done within the next couple of weeks. And then on site, we had to do a contaminated land assessment prior to commencing. That went well. You might have seen our guy with the jackhammer digger on Instagram, Benny Benassi going on in the back. Was it Benny Benassi? You know that one. Yeah, so anyway, we don't need to go down that path any further than possibly that being Benny Benassi, but possibly not being. Anyway, little jackhammer, digger man, dug some holes, all looked good. The report for that, I think, is due back like within the next day or two. But their sort of visual inspections on site said, yeah, no major concerns from a contaminated land point of view, so should be good to build. That was the final condition that needed to be discharged with the local authority before we can commence. And from there, we dug some bigger trial pits and we're doing more work on the ground to understand the right option for the foundations of the two new build properties. So we've got the existing building, which started life out as two houses with basements. We have got a neighbour on the other side that also has a basement. And then we're going to build two houses in the middle. So basements, obviously deep foundations. We've got two potential options. We could dig down, create basements for the new houses as well, and have deep foundations, probably using sheet piles to sort of protect the foundations on either side. Then we dig out a big hole, fill it with concrete, and then start building from there. Or we could use, my technical terminology is probably going to be wrong here, but like driven piles, where rather than digging out all the foundation, all the space that we would need for basements, we would forego basements, but basically drive piles into the ground, like at every couple of meters or whatever that the foundations would sit on, that would go down under the depth of the neighbour's foundation, so that we didn't disturb them, and also gave us like a strong base to build off. So either way, we're going to need piling on this site, but it's whether we go down the route of, and the expense of, digging out for basements on the new houses, and there's going to be a sort of cost analysis there to understand, is the additional cost of that worth it for the uplift in value that we would get, or do we just go for like regular piles and have no basements there, lower cost up front, but potentially less obviously a less uplift on the end value, because we wouldn't have that additional living space. So we've got some sort of cost analysis to do with input from structural engineers and QS to make the right decision on that. Once we've got that done, we can finish that foundation design. Structural engineer will sign that off, and then we will start building on that as well. We also have completed, and this is a bit backwards, but we've completed a tender process with several main contractors. We are ready to appoint one of them for the bulk of the construction program, but that's when the question of foundations was raised, which is why we've sort of put a pin in that and said, okay, well, we've got an idea of what the build for the houses are going to be, and the renovation of the two existing houses is going to be, but there was a big question mark against the foundations that we need to determine before we can finalize that contract. So we know which contractor we're going to use. We're ready to get them appointed once we have bottomed out these details on the foundations. So yeah, that's exciting. We also, following that tender process, removed several aspects of the build from that. So demolition, we got prices back from several main contractors, and we also sense checked that against specialist demolition contractors and said, hey, we've had this cost of X for the demolition aspect of this contract. As a specialist demolition contractor, what would you charge for that? And it came back at about 50% of what the main contractors were charging. Now, the main contractors were all more or less in the same ballpark for that demolition, but going out to a demolition contractor saved us a whack of money, or will save us a whack of money. So we're going to pull that piece of the work out of that main contractor contract, do that separately first of all, and then hand it over to the main contractor with the demolition already done. And again, probably we'll do the same with the internal fit out, so M&E onwards, because we can do that more cost effectively via individual subcontractors than a main contractor would be able to. So yeah, that's it. So we've got to finalize the structural design, we've got to finalize the contract with our main contractor, and then the demolition company that we have picked, they're ready to go. They could get started on site within a couple of weeks. The downside to that is obviously, we're coming into some pretty nasty weather. We've already had some pretty nasty weather. I say that sitting in 25 degrees in Cartagena in Spain, so I'm not complaining, but I hear back in the UK there's been some pretty nasty weather already, and that will probably only continue to worsen. So what we don't really want to do is do a lot of demolition, expose foundations, expose the interior of the building, and just let that get soggy for like 2 months whilst we deal with everything else. So we will wait until we're ready to go with the main contractor before we instruct that demolition, just so we don't have a site that's sitting there you know, deteriorating whilst work isn't progressing. Plus, it's our office for the time being. So if we can hang on to that until the end of the year, happy days, and we'll again make a real good start on this in January. Finally, IPI car park. Yes, still on our hit list, still progressing. Our longest running project, but it does continue to creep forward. So the tender process on this one was tough. It was an awkward size project. It was too big for a lot of small builders, and it's a relatively awkward site as well, as you've probably realized by now with the time it's taken us to get to this stage. But it was also too small for larger builders. So it was just this kind of awkward middle ground where nobody was really interested in it. We were also going through the tender for this one over the summer. You know, a lot of builders were slammed. They had so much work on well into next year that just trying to find enough builders who had capacity, who had the expertise to do it, but it wasn't too small a project for them to be interested in. We, I think, initially went out to 5 or 6, hoping that we would get 2 or 3 prices back, and I think we were definitely into double digits with the amount of contractors that we had to invite to the tender to get even, I think, 2 reasonable detailed prices back. So that was tougher than we thought it was going to be. What should have taken us, you know, 6 to 8 weeks ended up taking us, I think, like double that, like 4 months or something. We have selected a contractor, so that is good. But the tender process identified some issues between the architect's drawings and the structural engineer, some discrepancies. So architect had drawn one thing, structural engineer had drawn the other thing. Now that just cued the blame game between the two parties, but ultimately it has now been resolved. Again, a bit back and forward, a bit of redesigning things to get done, but resolved now. And it also actually identified an opportunity for the steel frame contractor to fabricate some fancy supports for the external brick facade rather than using the originally specified off-the-shelf solution that our structural engineer said, hey, this is the solution that you need to use to support this brickwork, but by the way, due to supply chain issues and everything else, it's difficult, if not impossible, to actually get your hands on at the moment. The steel fabricator came in and said, we've done something similar to this in the past, we fabricated it in-house. Mr. Structural Engineer, are you happy with this? Structural engineer reviews it, comes back and says, yes, happy days, we've got a solution to something that we thought was going to be a problem further on down the line. So that back and forwards between structural engineer, architect, and steel frame contractor proved to be, it was a mixed bag, right? It wasn't ideal that we had that delay, but it also solved a problem that we were unsure how we would deal with later on. So the steel fabricators are ready to get that installed. The main contractor is ready to get going. They've got capacity, they've got this kind of penciled in, ready to go, so they're keen to get moving. And now we're just trying to line up the program for the two of them to work together, because there's going to be some aspect of scaffolding required for the steel frame guys, who then makes sense for that just to be left up for the main contractor, but we don't want to have it up for too long because there's costs associated with that and so on. So we're trying to get that program nailed down between all involved parties to minimize any sort of duplicated work and costs. So yeah, that's where that one's at. We should again be moving on that one relatively soon, although I never like to commit too much to that project. So overall, we are progressing on all fronts. It feels good. Certainly Washway progressing, feels really nice. To be on site soon with Carwood and with Florist will be great. And obviously any progress that we can make on the car park always feels like a big win. This year has been a lot of admin, desk-based work. We haven't actually been on site a huge amount, but we took on 4 larger projects, all with relatively complex planning applications, structural design elements to deal with and all that. So whilst we haven't had pictures of joiners and electricians and tilers on site and finished bathrooms and transformations and before and afters and all that stuff, there's been a heck of a lot going on to get us ready for these projects to go, and we're starting to see the benefits of that now with Washway, and it feels like we're on the brink with the other ones as well. So it's actually been a really busy year, but kind of less exciting than usual because there hasn't been as much visible progress to see. But one of them well underway, the other 3 ready to follow within the coming months. We are super excited to see more tangible progress over the next 12 months and add those 22 new units to the housing market some point in 2023, spread out over the next 12 months. So big wins for us. in some of those planning applications that have been approved and the progress that we're making, and hopefully a positive contribution to the housing market as well, which is important to us, as I keep saying. So plans for the future really focuses on these 4 deals for the time being. Once Washway is done, we will then start to think, okay, well, what comes next? We are continuing to invest despite everything that's going on, or because of everything that is going on. We feel like it is still, there are always going to be good opportunities out there. So we will continue to build our portfolio as planned, or more or less as planned. We may start to look at the mix of properties in our portfolio and take on a couple of projects that we can get turned around without these big, lengthy, 18-month programs, because there is a lot of uncertainty just now, and it would be nice to buy something that we could be in and out of in 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, because that de-risks it for us. If we know that we can get in and not have planning to deal with and have a relatively simple renovation, and know that, well, the market can really only move so much in 6 months versus how much it could move in 12 months or 18 months or 24 months, that gives us a bit of peace of mind. So definitely looking at probably a couple of smaller projects to bulk out those larger projects that we are working on, and also just allow us to flex our capacity a little bit and focus on those when we've got downtimes, and then still have capacity to focus on the bigger projects as and when they need our input. So probably fewer big bets over the next 12 months, 24 months, but definitely still investing. I'm probably looking to do a higher volume of smaller deals versus taking on 1 or 2 big projects. Always opportunities to invest in our projects as well. So as you know, as you've heard, we are actively making progress. We are actively investing, and that gives us opportunities to give good returns to investors who are interested in debt-based, so loan-based returns. Some people at the moment are thinking, oh, hey, well, inflation and everything, interest rates are probably going to go up. Other people are thinking, oh my God, panic, take my money and just give me any sort of return so that it's not sitting in the bank. So it's kind of a real interesting time just now to be discussing things with investors. But we've got these projects, a lot of the risk on them is behind us. We're looking to raise private finance because that minimizes our reliance on bridging and development lenders and reduces our costs, which is always a positive, and allows us to give investors a good return as well. So if you're interested in investing in these projects, understanding a bit more about what goes on behind the scenes, I'd love to have a chat with you. You can drop me an email. Mike@insidepropertyinvesting.com is usually the best place to get hold of me. And that's it for this month. We are in the process of moving back to the UK, as I said at the start, so we'll be back there relatively soon. Hopefully you'll see me on site relatively soon as well, talking you through some of this progress in a bit more detail. But thanks for joining us today, and I'll talk to you soon.